Miss Claire, how are you?
That's me.
When's the last time you were in town, by the way? When's the last time you were in Palm Beach or
Ooh,
West
I
Palm?
think it was for Davina Wood's wedding.
When would that have been? A
So a couple of years ago.
couple years. Why
A
didn't
couple
you
of years
give
ago.
me a call so we could go out to lunch or something?
It's an excellent question. I think it was this summer. When was it? I don't remember. You've lost. Your mind is much sharper than mine. I've been watching yours. You remember people's turns of phrases.
Oh,
I can't remember when I was in Palm Beach last.
okay. All right. So this is you've just left Palm Beach Day. Take us through your education now.
Okay. Well, I'll do this, but I do this. It's interesting because I've been watching your videos and I've been meditating on where we're headed, which is the free will determinism discussion.
Okay.
And it made me realize that even back when I was with you then, you were sort of already pondering this, because if I'm not mistaken, although it's entirely possible that I am, you gave us An American Tragedy way back when, which is not exactly usually seventh grade reading, I don't think, but it was ours. And that has stuck with me. And I think about that quite a bit, especially I've been working on a project lately, going back through my history and my parents' history and the patterns that repeat through generations. And so anyway, so okay, I will indulge you in this strange journey of mine.
Before we finish, we'll get into determinism.
We'll get there
a little bit.
We'll get there.
Okay.
So I finished Palm Beach Day School. I did that, and I went to Andover, which was, I suppose, to be expected. And then my father killed himself, which was perhaps less to be expected. Although, if one looks at it in the context of the generations, perhaps to be expected. Anyway, so that sort of somewhat derailed me from my previously established routine, which I was quite on track to do. I went to Palm Beach Day, I went to Andover, I did school year abroad in France. I was well on my way until I wasn't, and I took a year off, and then I did a year of school at a castle in England, which was fantastic. I recommend to anybody who can, I suppose. And then I did a year of AmeriCorps, and then I was drug tested the last night that I was in AmeriCorps, and I said, well, this is stupid. So I went to work to legalize marijuana. Not that I smoked, because I don't, I just still don't. So I worked in politics for a minute, and then I won a contest, which was the MasterCard Priceless Experience Internship Contest, which sent me out to Los Angeles, to fabulous Los Angeles, where I went to like a crash course of film school and fell in love with LA. So I went back to McGill University for a summer semester, but it was too cold, even in the summer. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. Also, no one talked to me, which I feel like I'm a fairly friendly person. Not one person talked to me. It was the strangest thing. Anyway, so I left and I moved to Los Angeles, and I started working in movies, which I loved. And then I made the dumbest mistake of my life, which was that I went to Rome with a cult, which was something that my mother had sort of been getting into. And I suppose one's definition of cult, and again, you look back at what you're primed for, and I think anybody who has been brought up in the Catholic Church is certainly primed to believe absurdities. So anyway, so I was in Rome, and that's when I got severely depressed. And that's when I found out subsequently that I have bipolar disorder, which is also, feeds into your genes / free will / whatever. So then I came back to the States, and I moved to Las Vegas, which I also don't recommend anyone do ever. But it was interesting because it's interesting to observe psychopaths up close and personal, which again, getting into your free will, people's brains are just different and they see the world very differently. So, you see someone doing something and you're like, well, how, why? And well, they're a psychopath. It's, it's a different thing. Anyway, so I feel like that was a useful interlude, if not terribly happy or productive. But then I came back home to Los Angeles. And I love LA. I love LA. And I met my husband, and now I have 2 kids, and I'm pregnant, which is why I look like a friggin' fertility idol. And yep, number 3. I know, it's ridiculously fertile. Go figure. Who knew? It's insane. I have no idea why. clearly not of my own making. But anyway, and so here I am, and now I'm a writer. I work full time as a writer, and I ponder the meaning of life, and I watch YouTube videos of Mr. Greco pondering philosophy with others, and that's where I am.
And that's where you are.
That's where I am.
Well, honey, it's interesting. I don't know if you watched. I've had interviews with 4 former students, all PhD professors. One's at Notre Dame, one's at North Carolina, another one's at anyway. But they're all philosophy majors.
I noticed
I would ask them near the end. I'd say, by the way, I'm just curious. Where do you stand on determinism? And it's all split. They don't know.
Yeah.
They're not sure. I say, well, how about in your department? Oh, some guys believe, some don't, et cetera, et cetera. Have you, honey, gotten into it all? Into memetics, memes, and that whole thing?
Well, not really. And I haven't actually read The Selfish Gene, but I've read a bit more Sam Harris than Dawkins and Hitchens, of course.
Right.
But it's interesting. I was thinking about that just in the context. I do a lot of work in advertising, and I feel like advertising is sort of the last common space in America. You can get your news from Fox, or you can get your news from MSNBC, but the odds are you're getting your advertising is the same, more or less. And so it's sort of this last place that we have to create communal memes in a way, which I think is a sort of an interesting responsibility and quite powerful right now. But that's as far as I've taken that particular.
Okay, well, you're still young
subsection.
enough. Don't forget, I'm 88, and I've been working on this problem since, actually, I started on it in college, where I got hooked a little bit. It's behaviorism, B.F. Skinner, who was the first.
I want you to know, I'm going to choose chocolate every single time. Okay, vanilla ice cream is for the cows.
Even if you hate it, but you're going to do it because that is in your that's part of your scheme. That's part of your thing. I haven't been able to decide yet, because this idea, that they did. May I recommend a book to you if you really need? It's not too long. Along the lines of, it's called The Meme Machine. Susan Blackmore, her name is.
Yes, I will do.
And there's some good, but this whole idea of autonomous me, that little voice inside us that makes all these decisions and everything. It's not true, though. No. Those decisions that we think we are making, they've been made already, and they've done some work in physiology and brain scanning and that. And the one famous test they did, where there's the first, where you decide you're going to act, and then another thing takes place, and then the third thing. And they did all this scanning, and they find out where you make the decision, but it's already been made in the brain before that. So my thing is, if there is no autonomous man, maybe my great contribution should be, this is one of my fantasies, they've done some work and they don't know what the frontal lobe, they're not sure what, they know what this area does for speech and this for vision, but the frontal cortex, they haven't decided what that does. And maybe I'll discover that that's where autonomous man is. So I've really been making... It seems like there's a farce on something like that.
But I think that's, it's interesting, because thinking about this, that's sort of where I took it, which was okay, so if regardless of who's making the decisions, what does that mean in terms of meaning? Like man's search for meaning. Okay, I've lived this life, and what have I accomplished or not accomplished? And the I mean, you're right, like Sam Harris calls it the illusion of free will, right? So you take credit or you don't take credit, or what does it mean? And it's funny, because I watch my kids, I have a 3-year-old now, and you see so clearly, like the stuff that's genetic, you're like, oh my God, that is me. And then you see the stuff that he's learned, and then you see the stuff that he just can't control, like you see when he's like spinning off the rails, and you're like, oh my God, like there's your prefrontal cortex condition right there. You're like, what, something, please kick in. But so at the end of the day, I mean, you're what, 88, I think.
88.
Although I'm not sure I believe that. I'm starting in certainty, ending in doubt on that, Mr. Greco. But I guess the question is, like, regardless of who's doing it, then at the end of the day, at the end of the 88 years, what does it mean? How do you square that with yourself at night?
Well, one of the things, honey, as I said, I'm 88 going on 89 in July. But for me, it comes down to this. I'm wondering, in other words, as the title of his book, that last book he wrote with Skinner, Beyond Freedom and Dignity.
Mm.
If there is not, if I am not making those choices, if there's no little man, autonomous man inside me who's making those decisions, then anything that I have accomplished, honorific, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help winning this award or doing that. And by the same token, if I've done some bad things, there's no little autonomous man inside me that said, you're going to do that bad thing. It was already determined by your past genetic endowment, plus the environment and how the environment has worked on you, reinforcing all your actions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, when I first got into Skinner, honey, I remember I used two of his axioms and it worked in school with you people. One of them was intermittent reinforcement. In other words, kid does a good thing. Oh, good. And you see some of these, you praise. No, do 5 or 6 good things, and I'll praise that 7th one. Then do another 10 or 15, maybe 20. Then I'll praise it. But I'm not going to praise everyone. Of course, gambling, that's the whole thing that gambling's built on.
Absolutely.
And I picked that principle, and also successive approximation. You want to get from A to B, you don't do it in one big leap. Little steps, little steps. A quiz here, a written paper here, a pop quiz here, little steps to get them to know whether to say me or I, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the only two that I've really worked, and they worked. I found that they worked. But this whole idea, though, that, you know, you think, gee, all these things I've done in the past, it was already determined by my genes and my schedules of reinforcement and what I did as far as et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so honey, I don't know, but it makes it interesting. That thing, you said that, and I remember a college professor saying what you said to me once. Start in doubt and you'll end in certainty. Start in certainty and you'll end in that. But I don't know where I am. I started in certainty. I was brought up a Catholic, of course, you know, you're going to believe, et cetera, et cetera. And I ended in doubt. Had I started in doubt, maybe raise kids where, you know, they're not born into anything.
Yeah.
Be born into doubt, and maybe they'll end up in certainty. I don't know. I haven't decided that yet.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that certainty is the goal. I don't know. I think, you know, I was rereading in anticipation of our conversation. I was reading the Four Horsemen, the Dawkins and Harris and Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris makes the point. He's like, you know, quite often atheists sort of they ding themselves by not acknowledging that something's extra. You know, it doesn't have to be religion, and it doesn't have to be but spirituality of some sort. You know, what is that aspect of it? And how do we recognize that without needing to ascribe some sort of dogma to it? You know, and does that, do those types of experiences, do they breed certainty or doubt? I don't know. Like, my husband has had one that for him gave him great certainty that, like, there is something after this life, and he is very you know, okay with knowing that, and that is a certainty for him. But I think there's benefit to that. You know, certain people's, that certainly helps life.
Great deal.
I think, you know, the whole Voltaire, you know, if you can convince people of absurdity, you can convince them to commit atrocities. And I think that even on, like you were saying, you know, if you raise your children with that mindset. I've been deconstructing this with my mother, who was also raised Catholic, and I would argue very perniciously so, because so much of that dogma was absorbed by her and manifested in really sort of shocking ways just in life, in not having critical thinking. Oh, sorry, hang on. Speaking of my mother. And in accepting absurdities, which should not be the case, and in so doing, sort of untying little bits of your secular life along the way in ways that you don't even necessarily realize are attached to how you were taught to think. That's another thing that you were talking about in here, is that at the day school, and I'm eternally grateful for this, that you helped teach us how to think. It wasn't what to think, like the 100-question objective test is one thing, but it's the every weekly, read this article and then think about it. How do you
Well,
that's the difference. And so many people don't do
remember,
that.
and I tell all my classes, 6th grade and 8th grade, to be a critical thinker, number one, you got to be a good reader. If you're not a good reader, you can't be a critical thinker, because you can't get enough valid information. Sophisticated. Number two, you got to be a good writer. You have to be a clear writer, not a great writer, a clear writer, to get your ideas across, right? And that's what basically the school should be. That's what our priorities. That should be our priorities. Number three, we do some of this, but this, you got to be fair. That has to be started at home. That has to be started at home. I'm sorry. And number four, and by the way, this is the one that the kids that they identified with, even the 6th graders. I would say you have to be courageous. You have to be morally courageous, because you are going to find out, if you are a critical thinker, that you're going to disagree with your peers. And that's when all the hands would go up, by the way, with your school, with your church and your synagogue, with your government, and with your parents at times. And those aren't easy things to do. So you see where being a critical thinker is very, very difficult.
Well, and I think that's gotten much harder in the age of social media, where everybody thinks they get to sort of pile on and tell you that you're evil or congratulate you for some sort of moral courage, whether or not you've got it. I would add a sort of another point to your list of things to be aspired towards, and that would be to listen. I think we've really quite lost that a lot, to listen. And I think that, and I hate this phrase because it's been corrupted, but on both sides, there is a real failure to communicate, I guess. But a lot of that does come from listening.
I absolutely agree 1,000% with you. That's so important. All you got to do is listen. Listen to different people. And many times I find of people that, I respect them, their intellect, but yet some of the ideas they have, it's just, well, wait a minute. You really don't mean that, do you? You can't think that.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at that position? I don't know.
Well, I think there's been, and this really worries me, I think with the erosion of, well, I say the erosion of religion in certain quarters, although I guess maybe I phrase it differently. I would say there seems to be right now this sort of vacuum of identity. And as a result, identity has taken on these very sort of dogmatic qualities. And a big part of people's identity, I feel like, is now their political opinions and their outlook on the world. And as a result, once you've decided that I am a Republican, it's much more difficult to change those ideas, because that's no longer what you believe, it's who you are. And it's like, that should never be who you are. Like, those are a set of beliefs. And if you get a better idea, not even beliefs, they should be ideas. It's like, this is a set of ideas. And if a better idea comes along, well, let's jump on that idea. It's a better idea, but we've gotten so stuck in like, this is who I am, and again, not to blame social media, but there's a certain component of that. It's like, when you start defining yourself with these boxes and these categories, and all of a sudden it's like, well, if I don't believe this, am I still that? Then who am I? And I guess that goes back, it all goes back to free will.
There it goes,
Then
honey.
who is that autonomous,
That
they
man,
inside us?
or I should say autonomous man, woman now.
Man, woman. It
Politically
began with the
correct.
identity, my God.
Oh
It's
my goodness
true.
gracious. So Claire, let's reminisce a little. What are some things you remember about Palm Beach Day that you could go back and remember? Was there a lot of drama going on when you were here?
I will say I am so grateful that I was in the class that I was in, because we got along quite splendidly, as I recall. And there were other classes that were just horror shows. My brother's class was not fun. And even I have to say, it broke my heart. It was a beautiful, beautiful essay that Kathy wrote about you in the post. But I have to say, there was a part I did not know how sad she was, and that made me sort of sad, because I feel like there wasn't really a great deal of mixing between our classes, and so I feel like we kind of lived in our own little bubble my year, and we still sort of do, I guess. We're still pretty friendly.
Yours was the all-girl class, right?
I think Mr. Callahan made his way into our, and Josh Goodman, of course,
The English class,
the English class.
all
Chris
girls.
Callahan was in our class, wasn't he?
Okay, maybe
I think
you
so.
weren't here in ninth grade.
I wasn't there in ninth grade.
Ninth grade, it was an all-girl English class.
I'm shocked I hear.
The girls that stayed, right? And there was one especially, the girl. She hated me. I don't know what I did, but she would Dunmire. You remember her?
I know why she hated you. You made her cry for some reason.
Is that
She was
it?
like, she was emotionally fragile. Oh, you'd been like knocked out on your can if this had happened recently. Yeah, I don't know. She was upset about, I think something was going on at home. I was not very friendly with her. But yeah, and then I remember that she started crying. She held that against you forever?
She was going. I don't know. Did she throw a book at me or something, or was about? But I don't know what could I have said to her that.
I don't know. I'll tell you what I do. I remember. I have some fun memories. I do remember there was one day Mr. Bayless was so mad at me for some reason. I'd missed like an acting class or something like that. But I think I told him like I was not at fault. Like if I were at fault, I swear I would have copped to it. But I wasn't. And I remember he was like, I'm gonna like replace you in this role. And we were standing on your little balcony there with the two of you were standing there. And I remember I looked at him, I was like, go ahead. I'm like, you do that, mister. I'm like, have at it. Have somebody who will learn those lines and do it. But I remember you were laughing. And I was like, I was like, if Greco's still laughing, I'm okay. I'm on solid ground. Like if Greco goes like that, I should stop. But I was like, all right, we'll let that one go.
Do you remember your 10-minute speech, your final speech?
I'm not sure I remember I don't know if it was the final one. It was kind of a weird thing. I remember it because my grandmother died whilst I was writing one about the Muppets, which is again, just quintessential Bernard. But I don't remember how good that one was, but I remember the extemporaneous ones, and those were quite fun because I would just sort of, go up there and spout off, which was a good time. I don't remember being like totally blown away by anybody's speeches in our class. I got to be honest with you.
Okay, how about
we kind of.
Do you remember Cyrano de Bergerac and Julius Caesar, the 75 lines?
I do, and I was thinking about that too because the lines that I chose I skipped around a lot. I didn't pick like a full block.
Right. You were able to.
Yeah. But I picked, and I still remember, and again, apropos to our conversation, the fault, dear Brutus, lies not within our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings.
There you go.
There you go. Still there. Still got it.
Yeah.
And I will say, I was thinking too, and I had forgotten about this, but the biography that you write about somebody that you know, that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wrote that about my grandfather, and I remember because I got into a bit of a fight with my mom that night because I was talking to her about him and getting information. I was trying to write and it wasn't coming together, and I got upset and I went to bed and I woke up and I wrote it on a Post-it note. And I remember now in retrospect, looking back on it, that was kind of when I discovered my style, which I know is a sort of a obnoxious thing to say. but but I do in fact have that sort of style, which I think I can say. I mean, I do write every day now, it's my job, and it is a sort of almost a simple, I hope, clarity to it. But I realized that it really started in that moment when I wrote this thing, and I thought it wasn't sophisticated enough when I wrote it. But my mother read it because I left it next to my bed and I fell asleep. And she came in and she read it and she wrote me a note on the Post-it note, and she said, Claire, this made me cry. I really got a sense of my father through this and how you saw him. And so, and I don't remember what you thought of it, my friend. I hope you enjoyed it. But in retrospect, I realized that really did in fact help me clarify how I see the world.
So Claire, there we are. Let's see, how old are you now? You would be, I'm trying to figure it out now. Barbara's trying to give me the
I know she's like whispering to you. It's true. I'm 37.
37.
37. Go figure.
So in 51 more years.
Yeah. We'll do this again.
I want you to say, geez, I'm 88 years old, and think of me and figure out, where do you stand at that time on determinism? I'm just curious, because it's going to be with you, honey, all the time. You're going to go back and forth. You know that, don't you? That autonomous lady isn't going to be up there calling the shots. It's going to be, I don't know. I said, this is one of the conjectures you're going to have. Are you calling those shots, or has it already been determined by those genes that are in there and by all the reinforcement you've received from the environment, et cetera, that decides how you are going to behave in any situation? That's going to be interesting. All I can tell you, it's interesting contemplating, and especially reading, getting material on that. That's why when I got into this memes as the other replicator, before that, genes were the only replicators. But now a lot of the work in biology and in anthropology is, these memes are replicators. They act like genes in the sense that's all they're interested in is being replicated. They don't care if it's for good or for bad or that. All they want to do is to be passed on. So it's an interesting theory. And I'm sure you enjoy it when you start reading this woman's book.
But I suppose to a certain extent, I mean, it's interesting to think about that. I mean, I don't know if it gives me comfort to think that I don't have free will. Like perhaps it's in fact not my fault that I haven't written the great American novel. What is it they used to say about mediocrity?
Reeks of mediocrity.
Reeks of mediocrity. That haunts me still. And now I ask myself, but is it my fault if I'm mediocre? Perhaps, I mean, this is just the way it is.
That gets you into a whole different, if there is no little autonomous me up there, then I have no choice on these things I'm doing. How can I? Now, some of the psychologists and everything say, well, it can be determined by what's given to you, by who's setting your reinforcement schedules, your parents, et cetera, and exposing you to these things that's going to guarantee that. But again, I don't know. But sometimes when you're feeling real guilty about something, when you can say, yeah, it's not my fault. It's a genes, that environment that did it to me. But
then becomes the question, as a parent, which by the way, I never thought I'd be, how then do you break those? Or is it even possible to break these patterns? Like that's because we have, in my family, there are definite, heavy, not so good patterns. And is there a way to reshape those environmental on-off switches?
Well, at the end of The Selfish Gene, if you recall, Dawkins ends it with, there is a way that we can overcome this, etc. How you design. But this woman in the memes, Blackmore, She said, no, he was wrong though. You can't do that. It doesn't work there. There's no little thing up there that you can't.
It's all over.
It's all over.
But then I guess it gives you back to the question, is there then, and I don't think there is, but I mean, wouldn't it be nice, I guess, to believe that there's some sort of overriding framework in which we are all simply playing our role?
Could be, honey. Then you can get into astrophysics theories on the universe. You know, the different, what do they call them? The different universes. There's
the multiverse.
Yes, the multiverse.
Yeah.
Could be that. Who knows? Who knows? Claire, it's been so great, honey. It's been
I'm so happy
great.
to see you.
The next time you're in town, will you promise you give me a call?
Of course.
Lunch or dinner, okay?
Of course.
Okay. And how's your mom? Is she okay as far as the COVID goes?
She is. I'm so grateful. Again, a thing I never thought would happen. She moved close to me and helps me take care of my kids. Thank God. Because sanity, such as it is, would not be here were it not for her. So she's with my little girl right now. And she got her shots. So have you gotten your immunization? Have you gotten your vaccine?
My second one Saturday.
Oh, good. Mazel tov.
Saturday. Yes, but you were always one of those. You were always one of those. And as I said, Mrs. Greco, constant, all the time you were in school, and I can remember her on a couple of occasions really going to bat. Take care of yourself and your family. Too. And don't forget, the next time you're in town, you've got to come. If I'm still upright.
Of course, I'll find you on the tennis court.
There you go. Oh, good luck. You see this, don't you?
Never stopped you before.